Ms. Davis, let me have you raise your right hand. Please, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give to this honorable court to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, so say I do. Okay, Ms. Davis, I need for you to speak slowly and loudly so the court reporter can take down all the testimony and the jury, of course, can hear you as well as the judge. Ms. Davis, you are the defendant in this action, are you not?
I am.
And do you understand that you're under indictment of these 7 charges that have been presented here to this jury during this week? Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you understand, Ms. Davis, that you are under no obligation to testify?
Correct.
That if you should decide to not testify, then this jury cannot infer or think anything harmful towards you because of your silence. You understand that?
I do.
Do you also understand that if you should decide not to testify, that the district attorney's office could not argue to the jury that you're holding something back?
I do.
And that if you do give testimony, then you'll be subject to cross-examination by the district attorney's office.
I do.
Knowing that, do you wish to testify here today?
I do.
All right.
And speak up for me, okay, Ms. Davis?
Ms. Davis, just make sure that we have your complete full name. Tell us that, please.
Kianna Davis.
What is your middle name?
Aisha Renee.
And tell me the date that you were born,
December 12, 1990.
and where were you born at?
In Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Ms. Davis, are you a high school graduate?
I am.
Where did you graduate from and when?
Warner Robins High School in 2009.
And have you lived in Warner Robins most of your life?
Warner Robins in South Carolina is
Are you married? Have you ever been married?
No,
Did you give birth to any children?
I did.
And who was that child?
Karter Ambrose.
What day was Karter born?
January 14, 2018.
And where was he born at?
In Macon, Georgia.
And when did Karter pass away?
He passed away November 17th of 2020.
Who was the father of Karter?
Kiyon Benton.
Let me ask you this, Ms. Davis. Were you and Mr. Ambrose, Kiyon Ambrose, were you living with each other at the time that Karter was conceived?
At the time that he was conceived, no, but when I found out I was pregnant, yes.
Okay. And where were you living at that time?
At the time that he was conceived.
Right.
I believe I was back at my grandfather's house,
And who was your grandfather?
James Kennedy.
And Mr. Kennedy testified yesterday, is that right?
He did.
And what is his address?
309 Bonnie Drive, Warner Robins, Georgia.
And is that off Russell Parkway?
It is.
Is that where you're living at now?
It is currently.
So at some point in time, you were with child. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Kiyon Ambrose was the father of that child, is that right?
That is correct.
At some point in time, did you and he move in together?
We did.
When would that have been? Approximately.
Approximately, maybe immediately after I found out I was pregnant, or maybe like a month or two afterwards.
And where did you move in with Mr. Ambrose?
We moved to Sandpiper Apartments.
And that's in Warner Robins, is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that off Russell Parkway?
That is correct.
So at this apartment, until the baby was born, it was just you and he?
Correct.
Where was he working at?
He was a firefighter for the Warner Robins Police, or firefighter.
And he testified, did he not, yesterday?
Correct.
And at that time, where were you employed at?
I believe I was working at FedEx at the time, but then I switched jobs to a dermatology office
Where was this dermatology office at?
in Macon.
And this was while you were pregnant with Carter, is that correct?
Correct.
Were you in college at the time?
I believe I was taking some extra classes. I had already gotten one degree, but I was getting certified for a specific programming language.
Okay, where did you get your bachelor's degree from?
Mercer University.
Out of Macon?
Yes.
And what was that degree in?
Software application development and human-computer interaction.
And you say that you were taking some extra classes at that time, is that right?
I was taking, this was before going to Mercer, but I was taking extra. I had already had a degree in web design and web development, so I was just continuing my education by taking more classes to get certified in a specific programming language.
Okay, what specific program were you going into?
Java programming.
Pardon me?
Java is a programming language, so I was getting certified for that specific language.
Okay. Were these classes that were going towards a master's degree?
After the software application development, yes, I did get a master's degree after that.
All right. So at some point in time, after you got your degree from Mercer, did you begin teaching?
I was teaching before already. I was working for Central Georgia Technical College as an industrial aide, so essentially I was teaching.
Okay. Tell us, you were working for where?
Central Georgia Technical College. I was working as an industrial aide, so essentially my job was to run all of the technology in the classrooms that were being ran by the college for dual enrollment during high school.
And Central, this is off Cohen Walker, is that right?
Correct.
And when did you start working for them?
I believe around June of 2019.
Okay, and this was after the baby was born, is that correct?
Correct.
Were you and Karter Ambrose still living together at that time?
Yes, we were.
And tell the jury, if you would, if you worked for the college there, where that job took you to.
My main location and my office was in Jones County in Milledgeville, Georgia, where I spent most of my time until COVID happened. And then due to low staffing, I had to then take over other offices in the Warner Robins area.
Oh, okay. You take other offices at other schools, is that correct?
Correct.
Which other schools did you work in?
The Houston County Career Academy here in Warner Robins.
And that's off Russell Parkway?
That is correct.
Okay. And where else?
The Central Georgia Technical College at Cohen Walker in Warner Robins.
Okay. And were you still working at the school at Jones County?
Yes, I was doing all of it.
Okay. How often would you go to these different locations? Would you report every morning to the college and then drive to either the Jones County High School? Or how would you do it?
It would depend on which classes I was monitoring that day. So you typically get a schedule for the semester at the beginning of the semester, and it depends on whether or not the teacher was canceling class or not. They would let me know, and I would either go to the location or I would stay in my office in Jones County.
Would you do this 5 days a week?
5 days a week, yes, sir.
Okay. And in doing this, Carter, did you continue to teach? When did you leave teaching here for the college?
I signed my contract with Gwinnett County Public Schools in October of 2021. So I was scheduled to leave here and start working there in January of 2021. I'm sorry.
Okay, hold on.
I'm
Make
sorry.
sure we have the dates
I'm
right.
sorry. I signed my contract October of 2020 with Gwinnett County, and I was supposed to start working with Gwinnett County in January of 2021.
And Carter passed away in November.
Yes, he ended up passing away in between that time.
Now, so I take it, well, because we're doing these things in a sequence, you, after Carter passed away, did you subsequently move to Gwinnett County?
I moved to Gwinnett County when I started my job, so I would say maybe a week before the semester began, so around January 6th of 2021.
And what school did you work at?
At the time, I was scheduled at Peachtree Ridge High School.
And how long did you stay there?
I stayed for a year and a half because I was promoted after that.
And did you stay at that school or did you go to another school?
I went to open a school. That was part of my promotion to help open the computer science department at Secretary High School.
Your Honor, move approach.
Yep. Go ahead.
Ms. Davis, tell us again as to which high school you went to work for after Peachtree Ridge.
Secretary High School.
Okay, spell that.
Seckinger.
And that was a high school, a public high school
Yes, it had just opened the year that I started.
in Gwinnett County.
Yes.
And you stayed there until that you were arrested on this charge?
That's correct.
And that was when?
That was in October of 2023.
And since you were arrested, you were prevented from continuing to teach, is that correct? At that school?
Because I cannot physically be there, yes. But that was my only condition.
And you're currently living with your grandfather under house arrest, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's in Warren Robins?
That is correct.
Objection, Your Honor. This isn't relevant.
The objection sustained, the jury will disregard any reference to the conditions of her pretrial release. Moving on.
All right. Now, Ms. Davis, let me ask you this. Carter, his date of birth again was when?
January 14, 2018.
And at the time that Carter was born, did he develop any problems as far as being sickly?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Once again, you were living in Sandpiper Apartments with Mr. Ambrose?
I was.
Was Carter hospitalized soon after he was born?
I'm not sure how soon it was, but he was hospitalized for sure right before his first birthday.
And for what type of problems?
He was having breathing issues and he was admitted into the NICU for a few days.
The NICU where?
In maintenance.
At the time that this happened, were you and Mr. Ambrose still living with each other?
Yes, we were.
At some point in time, who was your doctor for Carter?
Dr. Waters
And where was Dr. Waters at?
at Primary Pediatrics.
And that's the primary pediatrics that we've been talking about all week, is that correct?
That's correct.
At some point in time, did you and Mr. Ambrose move from where you were living at Sandpiper Apartments?
We did.
Where'd you move to?
We moved to 6080 Lakeview Road, which was for the doctor's office. It was right next to the doctor's office.
Okay, how far away?
There's 6082, so I would say maybe a few yards, not even.
And was that primarily a reason for you moving to this location?
Yes, because of my child's medical conditions, I felt more comfortable moving closer to the doctor's office.
Would it be a fair statement to say that you spent a lot of time at the pediatric place?
A lot of time, yes, I would say. Yes.
And you were aware, are you not, of all the medical reports that were provided by their business, is that correct?
That is correct.
And as far as you know, that's a true and accurate representation of the times that you took Karter to that place for treatment, is that right?
That is correct.
What type of treatments?
You mean what type of things that did he go
Right.
for? He's been for allergic reactions. He's mainly been for his breathing issues and just minor checkups, regular checkups, and any COVID testing or anything that needs to be done.
At some point in time, did the relationship between yourself and Mr. Ambrose, did it dissolve or end?
It did.
When would that have been?
I really can't tell you when it started to dissolve, but I know for sure when he moved out in March of 2020.
Okay. He moved out in March of 2020, is that right?
Correct.
And you were still teaching at the college, is that right?
That is correct.
During this period of time, you say it was March of 2020 when Mr. Ambrose moved out.
That is correct.
Did you maintain contact with him from the time that he left until Karter passed away?
Contact as in regarding the child, yes.
Was he paying child support?
He was, we had an agreement before I actually initiated the court-ordered child support.
All right. Now, during this particular period of time from after Mr. Ambrose left, where was Karter being? Was he getting daycare, or how were you doing about keeping him when you worked?
Yes, so I would take him to daycare before work, and then I would pick him up in the afternoon unless his father was off from work or was able to, because his schedule didn't allow him to take him to work because he didn't be off in the time frame yet.
All right. And where was this daycare at?
Off of Russell Parkway near One Arms Middle School, I believe.
Would that have been with Ms. Tharp that testified
That is
this week? And how often would Ms. Tharp keep Karter?
She would keep him pretty much every day unless I had a day off or his father had a day off.
And did that involvement between yourself and Mr. Ambrose, was that fairly successful as far as looking after Karter?
Sure, yes.
Okay. In other words, there weren't any problems with that?
No, because we did everything around his schedule.
And the schedule that Mr. Ambrose worked with the fire department was, as he testified yesterday, 24 on, 48 at top. And you recognize that he had a part-time job of some
That's
sort?
correct.
Now, let me move on to November of 2020. Up until then, was Karter a happy child?
Yes, very happy.
And for the most part, was he fairly healthy?
For the most part, other than his medical conditions.
And if there was a problem with Karter, you would take him over to the pediatric place, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Were you fairly regular over there?
Yes, I'm a regular.
Ms. Davis, I'm not going to, and you know, Mr. Dwayne may ask, but I'm not going to get into, we've all heard what happened on the 17th of November. At that particular point in time, the day that Karter passed, where were you at physically?
The day that he passed, I was at work
Where?
in Milledgeville, Georgia.
And that was for one of the high schools up there, is that
Correct,
right?
for Jones County High School.
And Mr. Benton was watching Karter, is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you, when you found out that Karter was in distress, where did you go to? Where did you rush to?
I was on the phone with Mr. Benton, and he informed me that they were transporting him to the emergency room, so I met them at Peach County Medical Center.
Now, the information that you provided to the sergeant in this matter, and also to Lieutenant Meadows, and we heard the videos. To your recollection, the way of thinking, is all that true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
As far as the timetable is concerned, did you lay that out for Sergeant Collins and also for Lieutenant Meadows?
I did.
On the Monday night before Karter passed on Tuesday, did you contact his father, Mr. Ambrose, as to whether or not he could watch the child?
I did.
And why was that?
Because I felt more comfortable with him being home with either me or Mr. Ambrose. However, I could not take off work that day, the next day. So I asked Mr. Ambrose if he could possibly take off work to watch him.
And he would not, is that correct?
That is correct.
Were y'all going through a little bit of a spat as far as the child support order is concerned at that time?
I was not. I think that I don't think he agreed with my going to do it through the court system. So I don't think we weren't really on good terms because of that.
But in any event, you went to work on that Tuesday.
Correct.
Ms. Davis, let me ask you this, as far as did you ever do anything to harm your child?
No.
I mean, this jury has to decide these charges against you. Was this child ever harmed or hurt or injured by you or in your presence?
No.
Now, Mr. Benton, from time to time, had been at your place and looked after Karter, is that correct?
That-
Your sworn testimony, has Mr. Benton ever done anything in your presence or to your knowledge where he would harm this child?
No.
Did you ever take any action to where as though you felt like you were being negligent in taking care of the needs of Karter?
No.
Do you recall the child at any point in time falling or hurting himself or being in an accident of some sort there at the residence?
No, I do not.
The Saturday before, you were at your granddaddy's house, is that right?
That's correct.
Did you keep a close eye on Karter the whole time?
Yes, because he's always up under me.
Ms. Davis, this happened almost 6 years ago, and do you still remember what happened during those days before?
Vaguely.
As you have explained once again, what happened then to Sergeant Collins and Lieutenant Meadows, do you stand by what you said?
Absolutely.
And also Marcus Jackson from DFAX was there, is that correct?
That's correct.
During the period of time after Karter passed away, did you try to stay in touch with the sheriff's department or law enforcement of some sort as to what was going on with the investigation?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely.
I mean, what would you do?
I was consistently calling them for the 3 years.
And who would you talk to, do you know?
They would never come to the phone. I was always referred to the assistant to leave my number and that they would get back to me, and they would never get back to me, which is why I continue to call.
Would that just be law enforcement, or did you also try to contact the district attorney's office?
But I would contact Warren's Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, and the District Attorney's Office.
And you heard the testimony of Sergeant Collins, and you met with him, did you not? Right after Karter passed away, and then a few weeks later.
That is correct.
Did you ever talk to him anymore?
We did have one phone conversation, and that's all.
And what was the next time you heard from anybody from the sheriff's department?
I did not hear from anyone from the Sheriff's Department anymore after my last meeting with Sergeant Collins.
Okay. And at some point in time, you heard from Lieutenant Meadows, is that right?
A year later, yes.
Okay. And you drove down to meet with him, is that right?
That is correct.
And are you standing by the conversation or the information that you provided him at that meeting in December of 2021?
Correct.
Did you still continue to try to get in touch with with law enforcement about this?
Yes, for 2 more years.
Did they ever call for you to come down here and meet with them anymore?
No, they did not.
And the whole time you were teaching in Gwinnett County, is that right?
That is correct.
In addition to law enforcement, did you also talk to the coroner's office?
I never spoke with the coroner's office, gentlemen.
Ms. Davis, you're under oath. Once again, did you ever do anything to harm your child?
No,
Did you ever do anything to where you were reluctant or unwilling or unable to seek medical care for this child?
no.
Judge, that's all I have. Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Joyner, you have some questions?
It's up to you, counsel.
This is State's Exhibit 11. What is that?
That is a picture of my child's liver.
Your child's liver. That's quite a laceration, isn't it?
It is.
It is. And you heard the testimony that it will be 24 to 72 hours out. So either Monday morning to Saturday morning, correct?
Correct.
And he was just telling you his stomach hurt?
He was pointing at one point saying my stomach hurts, and that's all.
And you heard Dr. Eisenstadt say that this is a serious injury, right?
I did.
And that quite a bit of force would be needed in order to cause that injury.
That is correct.
But so Monday, he was just okay?
Monday he was throwing up, but I was at work all day Monday, so I did not see him all day. I only saw him during the period of time when I returned home for lunch and when I returned home after 5 p.m.
Okay. And he was hurting overnight though, wasn't he?
No,
He wasn't?
Overnight, what day?
Sunday.
Sunday, no, he was not.
Now, you said just a minute ago that you stand by the statements that you gave Collins, correct?
Correct.
And in your first statement, you told him that the symptoms started Sunday night.
I told him that on Sunday. He told me that, Mommy, my stomach hurts, and that was all on Monday night.
That was not your first statement to him.
It was my first statement to him.
Well, we all watched it.
We did.
And they can watch it again.
They can.
Yes, they can. So Monday he's throwing up. Is that right?
Monday, when I got home from lunch, I suspected that what was on the floor was a puddle of juice. I did not suspect at that time that it was throw up until after he threw up with me after I returned home around 5 p.m.
But you didn't take his calls for help seriously, did you?
I did take it as seriously as I could from what I was presented and what he was showing me.
I think you had said that he'd never thrown up like that before.
He has thrown up like
He
that.
has thrown up like that before. But he's a crybaby, isn't he?
He's a crybaby in the sense of he would tell me or he would cry if something was seriously injured or seriously wrong with him.
He would tell you something seriously wrong with him?
He would be crying and he would notify me that something was wrong with him. And
Is it
pointing or making, like I testified or like I said, he wasn't at a point where he could say full sentences yet. So it would be fragments of this is this, mommy that.
Well, is a 2-inch laceration to a 2-year-old's liver serious?
Yes,
It's very serious. That's why he died, right?
correct.
But he didn't say, point, he wasn't crying, it wasn't really alarming to you, was it?
He was not crying, he was not crouching over, he was not holding his stomach, he was not doing anything except for saying, mommy, stomach hurt, and vomiting juice.
And you expect the jury to believe that a 2-year-old crybaby, who you said cried over everything, who had a 2-inch laceration of his liver, wasn't really crying?
I expect them to believe what I saw and what I presented.
When did you break up with Kiyon?
Me and Kiyon ended our relationship around February of 2021
Why?
because
Because why?
he did, we just broke up. That was our first time dating. And 2, all of this was going on, so it was really a lot for me to even try to be in a relationship with anyone or focus on anything other than my child, and in this case.
And you knew him, right?
Correct?
And you repeatedly denied that he would have done anything to your child.
That is correct.
But you denied that you did anything to your child.
Absolutely.
And the time frame, as we've all heard, is that you and Kiyon were the only people who had access to him.
During Sunday to Monday.
Right.
Correct?
Right. Other than the Saturday that you were at your father's house, right?
Right, yes.
Okay, but he was fine that day.
He was running around.
And then Sunday is when he's not feeling well?
Sunday night is when he first mentioned, mommy, my stomach hurts.
Okay. And then into Monday?
Monday, after I got home from work, yes.
Okay.
After the work again.
But you say Kiyon would never do anything like that.
That is correct.
But you deny having done anything.
That is correct.
So who would have done it if the only 2 people were he and you?
That is a good question.
So we just don't know.
We don't. Considering, and I will say this, nurses, they've all testified that my child did not have bruises on his body when he was presented to them. That is Tuesday morning. So, according to that time frame that you're trying to give me, by Tuesday morning, if something like this would have happened, he would have absolutely shown bruises or something on his body to a complete staff of medical professionals. And every one of them got on the stand and testified that they saw nothing. So I also did not see anything to a point where I thought that I needed to rush my child to an emergency room after hours, after everyone was already off. I did not get home from work until 5 o'clock. That is after hours. I would have had to make an after hours appointment. I did not choose to do so because that was the first time that my child had grown up in my presence. And I believe that keeping him home would have sufficed for enough time for us to be able to monitor him and then decide from there what we needed to do.
So you said you didn't see anything.
I did not see anything.
Right. At some point you said you gave him a bath and he complained his balls hurt.
I was washing his balls, scrubbing his balls, obviously, because he had glue on himself, and he said, ouch, and I assumed that it was because I was rubbing his balls too hard.
Well, and I'm looking at State's Exhibit 10, which is a picture of that very region of his body.
Correct.
Okay, so he said, and is that not kind of a weird place to have a pain?
Not while I'm rubbing it, no.
Okay, so you never saw the injury,
I never saw the
him.
injury.
had no idea.
I never saw the injury.
What about the injury to his cheek?
I was not aware of any injury to his cheek.
No, you didn't tell Sergeant Collins that was from a hickey?
I did not tell him it was from a hickey. I told him that me and my child often kiss each other and like to suck on each other's faces.
And is that what caused that mark?
I have no idea.
So it could be from you sucking on your child's face.
Could be I have video of me sucking on his face.
is your testimony that you and Kadeem moved to that Lakeview Road apartment so you could have easy access to the pediatrics office, right? And we've seen the medical records, correct?
That is correct.
And you said that you were a regular.
That is correct.
And what would you take him in for?
There have been multiple allergic reactions, random ones. He also had breathing issues that either they would send us to the emergency room for, or we would already be there, or it was regular checkups. And then, of course, I always saw them whenever his allergies would flare up or his vomiting would move.
And you didn't have any problem taking him right away, right?
I didn't take him right away then either
Okay. You never took him right away?
to the doctor.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a problem, you just took him to the doctor, right?
No, you have to make an appointment.
Okay. You have to make an appointment?
That is correct.
Okay, well, obviously, you have to make an appointment.
That's obvious.
Would you make an appointment once you saw his symptoms?
I would make an appointment once I monitor his symptoms.
Once you monitor his symptoms?
Yes.
Like you monitor his throwing up?
From 5 p.m. until the morning that he passed.
Were you monitoring the symptoms when he threw up in his sleep?
I was sleeping, so no, until I went into the room. That was my intent to get up in the morning. I set my alarm to get up in the middle of the night to go and check on him.
But you were aware that he threw up while he
In
was
his bed.
asleep?
Correct.
And that wasn't alarming?
It was at that point, that was my very first alarm because he had threw up in his sleep and not while he was awake.
Mm-hmm. But you don't call Monday when you get up, right? When you wake up Monday, you just go to work.
Why would I need to call anyone on Monday?
I don't know. Would you potentially, you just said it was alarming that he threw up in his sleep.
That was Monday night.
Okay. And then he threw up again Monday, correct? So Monday he throws up in his sleep, which you say is alarming. Would you go to work?
Monday at 3, or sorry, that will be Tuesday now at
Okay,
3 a.m.
Tuesday? See, I'm still hung up on the fact that you told Collins that these symptoms started Sunday.
I
in your first statement.
told Collins that he first mentioned that his stomach was hurting on Sunday. On Monday is when I went to work. He was at home. And when I came home from lunch, he was sleeping, and there was juice on my floor. And what I presented was juice because the sippy cup was sitting right beside it, tipped over.
Right, but I guess my point is that on the first interview that you gave Collins, you told him that the kid was throwing up, Karter was throwing up Sunday. It wasn't until a month later, a couple weeks later, that you told him, oh, now it's Monday.
I did not, and also, I spoke with Mr. Collins the first time, the day after my child had died. So I was completely discombobulated that day.
Okay. And so you had kind of no idea what was going on. You're just monitoring conditions, but Carter's just happy as can be.
I'm monitoring his conditions, yes.
Right, and Carter's fine?
From my understanding, he has not yet thrown up in my prison.
Okay, so why doesn't Kadeem get to FaceTime his child?
Me and Kadeem were going through obviously a court battle, and he was annoying me, so I blocked his number. He could still contact me via either email or he could call my child's tablet.
He was annoying you by trying to figure out his overpayment of child support.
Why would he be overpaying for child support? That doesn't even make any sense.
You heard his testimony.
Why would he give me money for child support if he knew that he was overpaying?
I mean, he provided
He
his
gave me the
response.
money, that is correct. So that would not be overpaying, that is a voluntary, I'm giving you the money.
Stop emailing me. No, you can't get or talk to Karter. Leave me the fuck alone. And that's the last time I'm gonna tell you.
Correct.
All right. So, but you heard Kadeem's testimony about how you would block him when you got mad, but that he would always get to see his child, FaceTime or talk to him.
You also heard him say that he can only get his child during the times in which he's off work. So that would mean that he would have to be off work from his part-time job and his job at the fire station, which is not something that he can just say, I'm off. It's based on his schedule.
I'm not talking about his work schedule and whether or not he gets to keep Kadeem. I'm talking about the fact that his testimony was that even when you would block him, when you would be mad at him, he would still see his child on FaceTime or be able to call the child. And now, the weekend where your child's suffering a lacerated liver, all of a sudden he can't see his child.
No, I called him on Monday and asked him if he could watch the child.
Right. You called him Monday at what time?
When I got off the work, when he threw up in my arms.
Okay, after he's been sick for a while?
I saw him throw up for the first time that moment.
You saw him throw up for the first time at that moment when he was in your arms?
Correct, he threw up with me.
Okay. And that was when or where?
Monday in the kitchen,
Monday in the kitchen.
after I got off from work.
Okay, so we had the red flag in the middle of the night. Was that?
That was after.
That was after? Okay.
Correct.
All right, so you called Kadeem and said, come get him.
I called Kadeem and asked him if he could take off of work to watch him that full day and monitor him. Yes.
And then after the fact, you blamed him for this, right?
No,
Yeah. You didn't say if he had just come get him, none of this would happen?
I do not recall saying that.
You don't recall saying that, but you heard Kadeem say that.
That may be his feelings. I have nothing to do with that.
What do you mean you have nothing to do with that? It's a conversation between you and him.
No, it's a conversation between you and him and his own thoughts that has nothing to do with me.
So Kadeem's just making stuff up.
What would he be making up? He said out of his mouth, if he would have gotten the child, it probably would have happened. I had no control over that. All I could do was pick up the phone and ask my child's father, can you watch your child? And considering that she had just been calling me for 2 days, asking me if you could see the child, I would suspect that she would assuredly want to watch the child, especially knowing that he was sick. But he told me no.
Or none of this would have happened meant that the finger would have been pointed at him.
No, I don't know what you're referring to.
Right.
Why would I tell him that? He's my child's father. He's never.
Why would you tell him what?
Why would I tell him that if none of this would have ever happened if he had been watching my child?
Well, if the child died on his watch, we point the finger at him.
We didn't know that the child was injured at the time.
You didn't know?
No,
No. Just all this throw up, my tummy hurts.
correct.
And you stand by your statements that Kiyon would never do this.
I stand by my statement that no one around me would ever harm my child.
So if Monday he's throwing up, why didn't you just make an appointment for him then?
I asked for my child's father, who is an EMT and a firefighter, to watch his sick child. He is fully medically trained to watch his own child. He is medically trained to take care of anyone who is in an emergency situation. So yes, I went to him first before I took him to the doctor.
Well, you didn't take him to the doctor.
Correct, I did not have time. He passed away at 8:40 or 9:30 that next morning.
Right, well, but he was sick in the morning, wasn't he?
I went to work that morning.
Right, and that's
I
my point.
FaceTimed him, and I told Kiyon to rush him to the doctor's office, which was next door.
So after you couldn't pawn him off to Kiyon, or to Kadeem, you wanted to leave him with Kiyon.
Don't pawn him off to his own father? How is that?
His injured child? Yes. Yes,
At
so
the
you just
time,
go to
he
work.
was injured. At the time, the only thing that he was presenting to us was throw up.
Throw up in his stomach hurt really bad.
Not really bad. Mommy, my stomach hurts.
Not really bad, a 2-inch lacerated liver, but he's telling you his stomach just hurts. It's not really bad. He's not crying, nothing.
He is not crying. I work with children. I would have suspected someone of this magnitude to be crouching over, to be holding his stomach, to be indicating something of pain.
I think we all would. So when Kadeem doesn't take Karter, you don't make a doctor's appointment for him.
It's at this point around 7 o'clock, And after hours is what you would have to do in order to get an appointment. You would have to call the number, and if you get an appointment, they will then tell you that you can come in at a certain time the next day.
Mhm.
So there is no instance where he would have been able to see any medical professional unless I called 911 that day.
Urgent care's open?
I don't know about urgent care.
Emergency room's open?
He did not present any symptoms where I felt like I needed to take him to me.
And that's not what I asked you. I asked you was an emergency room open.
I'm assuming
You're assuming
emergency rooms are open.
they're not open 24 hours?
I'm assuming they're open 24 hours,
You,
but
you assume that's not something that you just know, you're just guessing that that's true?
I don't work for an emergency room, so I don't know what
And
time.
neither do I, but I don't need to work for an emergency room to know that I can go there at any time.
Correct.
Right, so you do know that.
You can go to an emergency room at any time. That's basic information.
And if you had called your doctor, chances are you would have gotten a recording that said this is after hours. If this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911.
Correct.
You did none of that.
Why would I need to call 911 for vomit of juice?
Or go to the emergency room.
He was vomiting juice, and this was not the first time that my child has vomited. And the first time that he was vomiting, we did go and see a doctor, and she told me that because it could be allergic reaction, that he would eventually get over it. So no,
But it is the first time that he vomited in his sleep and didn't wake up.
he did wake up.
He did wake up.
You just heard them say that he was on the phone with me and he was awake.
In his sleep the night before.
In his sleep the night before, he threw up in his sleep. I took him and I moved him to the other bed. When I got up that morning for work, which was a couple hours later, he was wide awake and he was talking.
And you were on the phone with Kiyon when he was taking your dying child to primary pediatrics, correct?
I was on FaceTime the entire time. Yes.
Okay. Do you remember any of the statements that y'all made on the phone?
Statements on
Do you remember any part of that conversation?
No, because I was at that point driving from Milledgeville. I had ran out of my office and I was driving from Milledgeville back to Warner Robin.
So you don't recall if Kiyon said to you, man, I should have brought him in last night when you told me to?
No,
Why would you have told him to take Karter?
that's a very good question because why would I tell him to take him?
Right, well, I mean, you did tell him to take him
I
Tuesday
did not
morning.
tell him to take him. On Tuesday morning,
You did.
why wouldn't I tell him? He's the only one with him.
He said, don't worry about that right now, just get here. Do you recall that?
I do not.
In the daycare, Miss Shirley, right? How long have you been knowing her?
I've known her since my child went to daycare.
And you kind of went to high school. You went to high school with Kazette
I did, but we did not hang out, no.
until you started bringing Karter to her mom, and then you guys kind of had more of a friendly relationship.
No, I never had any type of relationship with Kazette until after my child passed.
Okay. Till after your child passed. So what was that relationship like?
There was no relationship. It was more so they had a party and she invited me over and I went to her place and that was the last time that I saw or spoke to Kazette.
And you took wine to her place, right?
I did not take wine.
So you didn't go to her place to pick up a plate?
I went to her place, like I said, they were having a party of some sort and I went to pick up a plate of food. Yes.
You don't even know what kind of party it was?
No, I don't.
You don't recall it being a Christmas party?
No,
You don't recall that Kadeem took Christmas gifts there?
he didn't tell me that he took Christmas gifts. So
Okay,
no.
okay. But who called you and told you that you could get a plate?
Kazette,
Gazette did?
Yes.
And you could pick it up from her house?
correct.
And you guys didn't discuss anything while you were there?
No,
You didn't tell her that he had a lacerated liver?
I don't recall, no.
Okay. You don't recall? Well, you just said that you didn't talk to her at all, and now you're saying you just don't recall that you made that statement.
I just said I don't recall telling her that my child's liver was lacerated. I obviously had conversation with her because I was at her place.
And you told her that you Googled it?
I don't recall telling her that.
You don't recall telling her that it could be because he jumped off the couch?
No, I don't recall telling her anything, but if I did, then I would probably have said what I researched.
And you never blamed Kiyon?
No.
Well, Miss Shirley, did you keep in contact with Miss Shirley after Carter's death?
Not really, other than her checking on me, no.
So you guys had a discussion though, right? She would check on you, would she just say, are you okay, and then hang up the phone, or would you guys actually exchange words?
I don't recall.
You don't recall
It was
anything?
6 years ago. I don't recall.
It was 6 years ago, but she just testified that that's what happened.
That is what she testified to. That's not my recollection of the conversation.
She spent a lot of time with your child, didn't she?
She watched my child.
Pretty much all day unless Kadeem wasn't at work, right?
Correct.
Right. She loved your child, didn't she?
Sure.
And she made, what was it, a pillow with his picture on it?
She did.
And at his viewing, he had some kind of vehicle in his hands, didn't he?
He did.
And that was her vehicle, Miss Shirley's, right?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure? And you didn't give it back to her?
Why would I? She left it in his casket, obviously.
But you guys have never discussed anything after this? About Carter?
No, I did not.
Okay, so you never told her that he fell off and hit his head on the bed?
No.
So everybody's lying,
Yeah.
except you.
Why would I have to lie?
Well, why would the primary pediatrics people lie?
What did they lie
About the statements that were made on the phone
What do you mean?
with you and Kiyon.
I'm
People
sure-
that you love, that we saw on the body cam, how broken up you were for them. About what happened to this boy because he was regular and they knew him so well. And the moment you went into the office, they knew you. Right? So why would they make up these statements that are made on the phone?
They only said that I told him to, or that he said, don't worry about it, just get here.
Yeah, and what were you doing?
Driving.
You were driving?
Correct.
Okay. And where were you coming from?
Milledgeville, Georgia.
What age kids did you work with? I think it sounds like maybe there were college students. that
They
you
were
worked
high
with?
school students.
High school students? But you don't really know anything about the statements on the phone.
I was driving. They just told me my child was being rushed to the emergency room. I'm driving. I have an hour drive. I'm also trying to contact his father to notify him of what's going on. There's a lot going on while I'm trying to drive on the highway.
So what is Kiyon referring to when he says, don't worry about that, just get here?
I have no idea. I'm sure I was trying to find out information about my child.
Did you talk about this afterwards with Kadeem?
Talk about what?
Talk about anything?
I had multiple conversations with his father.
And was there any conversation about the lacerated liver and him and Kiyon? And if you ever found out about something?
Every time that I would try to contact my child's father about the case or anything involving the case, he did not want to talk about it, which I can understand that he didn't want to have more conversation about the death of his child.
Well, I don't think that's what I'm referring to. Because didn't he testify that he told you that he didn't know what he would do if he found out if it was Kiyon? Didn't he testify to that?
That's what he said out of his mouth. I mean, that's his personal, emotional,
So he's lying too, or what?
lying about what, that's his personal, emotional feelings. He doesn't know what he would do if he found out someone else did something to his child that has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, I'm referring specifically to the statement of that he made to you.
What
He
about-
said that, right?
He did say that.
And what was your response?
I don't know.
Well, according to his testimony, you defended him, right? You defended Kiyon.
All I said was
You got mad at Kadeem.
I did not get mad at Kadeem. All I said was I do not believe that Kiyon would ever harm my child.
So we know that Karter had his own bedroom in your apartment, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that there was kind of this battle between keeping him in his own bedroom.
Not a battle, he was sleep trained.
He was sleep training,
Yes, so I was training him to sleep in his own bed.
but he would come and knock on your door or try to find you.
Obviously, he would get up in the middle of the night and try to come back and sleep in my bed, yes.
Okay. He would. What about if you and Kiyon were in the bedroom with the door closed?
We wouldn't be in the bedroom with the door closed.
What about, where would you guys smoke marijuana?
We did not smoke marijuana in my house. He would smoke outside or on the patio.
You would smoke outside on the patio?
On the patio.
So you never had anything to do with any of that?
I never had anything to do with any of that.
Try to get a new phone after this?
Did I try to get a new phone?
Mm-hmm.
As in a phone number or?
A new phone, like upgrade your phone?
I believe I did upgrade my phone only because me and his father shared a phone at the time or a line, and I was returning his, and I was eligible for an upgrade, so I believe that I did upgrade it or whatever.
When did you become eligible for an upgrade?
I don't know.
Does December 6, 2020 sound right?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you know how many times you checked to see if you actually qualified for an upgrade?
I would never check to see if I qualify for an upgrade. I don't know.
I got it. Okay. This is Stacy's at 60.
Right.
Can you look through this form?
Sure.
Do you have any idea what that is?
Those are records of an eligibility check from, I guess, my account.
From your account? And there were a lot of pages, weren't there?
They are
Okay, what were the dates?
from November until, I believe it was January, I don't know,
Until December? Or?
December, January. I didn't necessarily look at the last date.
That's quite a few pages, isn't it?
Of eligibility request for upgrade on my cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay. A lot of them came right after this incident happened, didn't it?
Sure. But I mean, I work in tech, so me upgrading my phone had no bearing on anything because everything would then be transferred over to my new phone.
Why did you tell Kiyon to give him a breathing treatment that morning?
Because Kianna had mentioned that he didn't think that he was breathing correctly. So I immediately said, well, I asked him to lift up his shirt so that I can see if he was retracting a little bit. I did not notice him retracting, but because he stated that he thought that he was breathing oddly, I told him to give him a breathing treatment anyway.
And you knew the signs and symptoms, right?
Yes, which is why I asked him to lift up his shirt.
Right, and you didn't see anything,
No,
but you said give him breathing treatment anyway.
correct.
You don't recall saying that Carter threw up 4 times Sunday night to Collins in your first interview?
I don't recall anything from that first interview. Again, I had just lost my child. It was a lot going on.
How many times did he tell you his stomach hurt?
I don't know.
Was it once?
He told me Sunday night. I went to work on Monday. I never heard him say it again until I returned home and he threw up in my face. And then he said, "Mommy, my stomach hurts."
Did you give him a bath after that happened, or did you give him the bath prior to being in the kitchen?
I gave him a bath when I got home because I noticed that he had juice all on his shirt.
But it wasn't juice, was it?
It was juice.
It was juice?
It was juice.
What was on the carpet?
Juice.
Juice was on the carpet?
Juice.
Okay. But you said that you kind of deduced that it was throw up at some point in your statements to law enforcement, right?
Throw up in my mind is throw up, which it should contain food, some sort of consistency, chunkiness, something. This was not that. This looked like water mixed with juice.
So why did you tell law enforcement that you've kind of figured out later, once he threw up in the kitchen, that you figured out it was throw up?
I said, because when he threw it with me in the kitchen, he also vomited the juice and clear fluid. So I then immediately said that must have been what I noticed on the floor from when I came home from work.
And you said that there was something I would tell you to law enforcement once they told you about the injuries, right?
Of course.
So there's nothing.
I did not witness any type of anything, no. And there was no evidence of any bruising or anything on his body to me, nor was there any evidence of any bruising on his body to the medical staff who saw him that Tuesday morning.
But Carter didn't run to you and point at Kiyon and
No.
say he hit me.
No.
And he would do that, right?
He never said anyone hit him, but if anyone did hit him, he would point to whoever. I would ask who did it, as I would refer to my child, and he would point and tell me who he thought would do anything.
Right, like if he got hit at daycare, something like that.
If he got hit at daycare, I wouldn't have known unless Ms. Stark told me.
But you said if anything would happen, Carter, who was a crybaby in your words, would come to you and point at what happened.
Carter's always the last one to be picked up from daycare because I am the latest parent to pick him up. So whenever I pick him up from daycare, he is typically the only child there. So there will be no one to point to.
Okay, then why did you tell police that? Why did you tell police that if someone hit Carter, that he would tell you?
Because he would.
But he didn't do that with Kiyon.
So that obviously means no one hit him.
Nothing further, Chad.
Thank you.
I have nothing else, Connor.
You can step down now.
Ms. Davis, come